Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, monsters, and welcome to this week's episode of Monsters on the Edge on the Untold Radio Network. I am your host, Barnaby Jones, founder and lead investigator for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society here in Wisconsin. And we have a great show for you today. Our guest today is going to be Rich Daniels, and he is going to be talking all about traumatic effects of cryptids and Bigfoot encounters. But before we get to that, it is May. It is finally May, and that means all of our big events and stuff are starting to kick off here in Wisconsin and for caps and all kinds of stuff. So let's get to it. Coming up first here, guys, in just a couple days, couple weeks, May 18th, we kick off our festivals and convention season here with a bang with the Hodag Heritage Festival, May 18th in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Find all about the Pine Barren Beast of the Hodag, and whether or not it's an actual cryptid or not, that's up for debate. But he is out there, and we're going to have a very awesome festival looking for him. And if you guys want to come out bigfooting, Rhinelander, Wisconsin is a very squatchy area. And my team has investigated and done a lot of research up there. And we're leading a group out on May 18th at 7 p.m. to go looking for evidence and see what we can find. So if you want to come out and join us and go bigfooting with the Caps team, tickets are available at wisconsincaps.com for that. And come on out to the Hodag Heritage Festival during the day because it's a free event for the city. All that information is at wisconsincaps.com. Click on the public events page. And of course, guys, the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention wraps up May and leads us into June. May 31st, myself and my guest on today's show, Rich Daniels, will be leading an expedition out onto the Hayden Adventure property. It is 80 acres of private property just outside of Menominee, Michigan, where Bigfoot evidence has been captured for over 10 years on the property. Everything from trail camera images, audio, video, thermal, all kinds of stuff has been gathered. And you guys can come out and see where it all took place and go Bigfooting with myself and my guest today. And then come out to the convention June 1st. It is going to be myself, Rich Daniels, Chad Lewis, and Doug Hychek will be presenting. It is $15 in advance or $20 at the door. We are also going to have vendors at this event. And Angela Zabel is going to be doing a psychic gallery reading on June 1st at 7 p.m. after the convention. So, guys, if you can't make it out to this event and still want to be part of it, you can get a virtual ticket. Virtual tickets are just $5, and you can watch live all the presentations from anywhere you are, wherever in the world. So make sure you guys check that out. Tickets are available, wisconsincaps.com, and click on this banner right on the homepage, and it'll take you right to the tickets. And then the following week, June 8th, we are going to be in Chicago at the Chicago Paranormal Convention. And then in August, we head to Squonkapalooza in Pennsylvania. And in November, we head to Lexington, Kentucky for CryptidCon, as well as a ton of library presentations. So all of those are available at wisconsincaps.com. Click on Public Events tab, and you can see where all I will be doing presentations and what they will be on. So guys, go check that out. A lot of stuff coming up. It's going to be a fun year. If you guys want to show your support for all things here on the Untold Radio Network, here's how.
Hey, Untold Radio Network fans. Want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
We have a brand new Super Chats member here. Thank you so much for being a member. We really appreciate it. It helps keep the Untold Radio Network running strong. And thank you so much. We appreciate it. And again, Lee Warner, thank you for being a Super Chats member as well. Awesome, guys. Now let's get right into our guest for today's show. All right, guys. Like many in the Bigfoot community, Rich's journey in pursuit of the truth about the phenomenon began with an incident that no one could explain. An encounter in January of 2000 lay unresolved in his mind for 5 years until a chance viewing of a Bigfoot documentary provided insight into that experience. Since 2005, Rich has worked to reveal answers to many questions of the Bigfoot phenomenon. His journey has taken him from shocked witness to armchair enthusiast to field researcher and finally to citizen scientist. Rich has reviewed thousands and thousands of sighting reports, interviewed over 700 witnesses, and ventured into areas of research few others have. In 2016, Rich became aware of a connection between the traumatic after effects reported to him by many Bigfoot witnesses and those reported by patients he worked with as a mental behavioral health paraprofessional. His 12 years of experience in the mental behavioral field, where he put to a test when he undertook a study to document those after effects in Bigfoot witnesses. With a case study that encompassed over 400 witness interviews, over 1,200 hours of interview time, and 3 years of work. Published in 2019, that study to this day remains unchallenged by anyone in the Bigfoot community and proposed a new mental health disorder, paranormal encounter syndrome, a condition of acute stress response approaching PTSD. In his first book, Footprints in the Mind, The Bigfoot Witness Experience, Rich breaks down what a traumatic Bigfoot encounter can be like from behind the eyes of a witness. Rich lives and works as an educator in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is a widower and has one daughter, a United States Army pilot in training. And without any further ado, please welcome to the show my guest, Rich Daniels. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me on, Barnaby. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's I watch this show all the time, which kind of I guess I'm kind of telling my boss that I take a chance during the day at work to watch your show. So that's how much it means for me to watch this. But thanks again. I really appreciate you having me here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being here and all your work, man. This is amazing. I've gotten the chance to talk to you once before. I still haven't met you in person, for as much as we've done and crossed paths and stuff. So I'm looking forward to this because, as I said at the beginning, we are going to be at the convention together. Now, you have actually been at this convention before, correct?
Oh yeah, it was it was really weird. I was my research has always been just for me, until the past few years, and I have Craig Salk to blame for all this because I one day on trolling through Facebook and looking for information and things like that, I saw an ad for a Bigfoot convention, and it didn't have any address on it or anything like that. It just had a phone number, and I believe this was in 2016. And I called the phone number, and it was actually to Craig's house. And we started talking, and he told me who he was, and I went, "Oh man, I remember you on Finding Bigfoot." And we went, we started talking. First time we ever met each other on the phone, we talked for 3.5 hours, and we continued to have these conversations that every couple of weeks or so, where we'd sit there and get on the phone. It'd be 4 hours talking about something, and he'd ask questions, and I'd tell him what I thought, and I'd ask questions. He'd tell me what he thought, and then he said, "Hey, why don't you come up here and be a speaker at this convention? It's our first one." I believe that was the one in 2017, and I had never thought about ever sharing my research with anybody or to going out to talk about it or anything like that. And he convinced me to do it. And little did I know, I went there and I was the keynote speaker. He didn't really tell me this, but yeah. So, but that's Craig. Yeah, that's Craig all the way. He just loves it. I can't tell you how many good times he and I had. And then, so I did that one. And then in 2019, I came back and was able to release my study that I had done at this particular convention as well. So, it's a long history there. And I had a little extracurricular activity on that particular visit as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you would like to share that, I'd absolutely love to hear the story again. And so this was on the property, right?
Yes, it was. You see, what Craig had done with me is that he got me up there and he said, "Look, I'll just put you up at my place." And he borrowed a camper that I was able to stay in. So they parked the camper right in their driveway. And we had the convention that day, and I released my study. And man, it was a big draining day. It was lots of energy and everything. And got settled down to sleep that night. And the camper, the bedding area in the camper is always way in the back. So I'm in the back, and I'm 6'2", and the bed was 6 feet. So I had to sleep catty cornered on the bed. Basically, my head was in the back corner of the camper, and got to sleep that night, no problem. And then something woke me up, and it was a sound. I don't think it sounded like something hitting into the side of the camper. And I don't remember any vibration or anything like that. I just remember the sound kind of startled me to sleep, or started me from my sleep. And I sat there, kind of blinking my eyes and everything, trying to wake up a little bit. And then I heard this noise, and I couldn't place it. I just didn't have any idea what the noise was. And it went on for about, 4 or 5 seconds, and then it stopped. And I was like, wow, that was weird. I don't know what that is. And then about 15, 20 seconds later, it came on. It came again. And I heard this, and I'm trying to figure out what it was. And we kept going through this cycle. Every 10 or 15 seconds, I would hear this noise for about 4 or 5 seconds that I didn't understand what it was. And then about the fourth time, I heard this noise, and my eyes popped open, and I went, that is the sound of a stomach growling. You know, that gurgling noise that you get. And of course, I'm laying in this bed, and right up to my left is a window, and it had curtains on it. And I rolled over, and I reached for the window, and my hand caught the curtain first, and I had to fumble with the curtain, and my hand hit the window and everything like that. And when I pulled the curtain out, there was nothing but a darkness, pure darkness at the window. And then the moment I pulled the curtain, boom, the darkness went away, moved away down towards the front of the camper, and I could see starlights and starlight and all the trees that were out there and everything like that. And immediately it clicked into my head, something huge was standing right next to that window. And it had gone down to the front of the camper, and I snapped up and looked down the center aisle of the camper, down towards the front of it. And it was one of those campers that had windows in the front, but had those shutters that you can close and go up and down like that. And they were open at the bottom. You could see about 6 inches from the bottom of the window to the or to the shutter. And I could see the truck that was parked in front of the camper. And as I looked down there, this huge shape just goes across, and those when I could see something move right through those windows. And immediately the adrenaline started pumping, and I started to go, and it was, I mean, I looked at the clock, it was about, I think it was at 3:20 in the morning. And my first instinct was go get it, go see what it is. But I'm sitting there in a t-shirt and gym shorts, and I'm on a plot of land I've been on before, but I'm not so familiar with it. I want to go running around at night, but not by myself and not unarmed. And I sat there for a second. I went, nope, better I let this go. And then it's 3:20 in the morning, and there's no going back to sleep after that, none. And I'm trying to figure out what to do. And then I thought about, okay, how do I approach witnesses that I help with the traumatic effects they've had? So I sat down and I started to write down everything, every last detail I could remember, and everything like that. And it was such a brief encounter. It all happened in about maybe a minute, including the sounds that I had heard. And I ended up writing 3 pages of details and everything that goes through. I mean, because when I tell people to do that, I say just write down every detail you can remember. It doesn't matter whether you think it's important or pertinent to the story or anything like that. If you remember the detail, write it down. And so that's exactly what I did for myself. And I was there focused. And by the time I got done with it, it was about 4. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not going to rush them out of bed for this. I mean, for me, it was really exciting and new. But for Craig and Barb, his wife, that's all the time for them. They had those kind of experiences all the time. And so I said, I'm going to wait until they're up. And, the energy was such that I had, because this causes great emotion when you have these experiences, and emotion generates energy. And that energy was just flowing through me. So I ended up for about an hour and a half just pacing back and forth up that center aisle of that camper, and just running through things in my head over and over again, which I think witnesses are apt to do as well. And about 5:30, I saw the light in the house come on. I went up, knocked on the door. I said, "You're not going to believe this." And that's when Craig and I went out and looked around. And we tried to find, of course, we were out in his driveway, and of course that's packed down hard, so there's no footprint that's going to come out of that. And then we went and looked at the space between the camper and the truck, didn't find anything, and we could see the trajectory of where that path would take them off back towards the back part of the property. And we walked across his front yard, just to be able to get over there. And we both walked the same path to go. And we started looking around the trees and everything that are around there on that right, that side of their house. And as I turned around, I looked back, and I could see where we had come through the grass. You know how the grass gets really shiny when you've stepped on it; it's shining in the sunlight. I saw where he and I had walked through, and then there was a separate path that was at a different angle than we had walked. And I said, Craig, look. And we both looked around, and he just got this big grin on his face. It's like, yep, there they are. And we could tell pretty much that the path going through there to the other side of the property was blocked with a lot of deadfall. He piled up a lot of deadfall there. It was a long pile. And something would have had to have jumped about 40 feet to get across it all and get to the other side. So we naturally deduced that this thing had to go out to the road and up a little bit and then go to the access road that's on the back part of the property. So we followed that path all the way, stopping at different trees and bushes or wherever, just to see if there's any hair samples or anything like that. We couldn't find anything. Then we got out to the road and back onto the access road, and we started walking. And there had been a little rain the night before, and there were puddles all on that access road. And immediately we both said, yeah, when something steps in a puddle, it stirs everything up. But once everything settles, you can see that footprint really well when the water. So we were checking these puddles all the time and all the way going back there. To the right side of us is, the property where they had all their hunting lanes and everything. And to the left side of us is that swampy area that you had there. So there really wasn't a lot of places for this thing to go. Probably taking the path of least resistance up and down the road. Well, we got about halfway down this road looking for different footprints and different types of anything that we could find. And as I stood there, I stopped and I realized that everything had stopped. Everything was quiet. It was like standing in a vacuum. And that, of course, tells me there's something big around. There's something that nothing wants to be able to reveal its presence to. And I said to Craig, I said, "Do you hear that?" And he said, "Hear what?" And I said, "Right." I said, "We're not hearing anything, my friend." Neither one of us had any sidearms with us or anything like that, and we could very well be walking into a situation that wasn't good. And we agreed right then and there that we should turn around and go back. And I basically I had ball cap on. I just tipped my hat and said, "All yours, big guy," and we walked out. And but that was actually my fourth encounter to be able to go through, and what a privilege it was to go through that, not only at a conference or anything, but to go through that along with Craig, who just such a great guy, such one of the most open minds I've ever found in this field. He was there to learn, and he was there to share what he had learned, and man, it was a real experience to go through it with him.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know, he actually passed away in April of 2021 of thyroid cancer. He was diagnosed in October of 2020, and it was really quick. That was it. But we continue on with the convention, and the Heightened Adventure is still there, and we are going to be out there where it all took place. So if you guys want to come out with me and Rich, we are going to be leading an expedition out onto the property where all this took place on May 31st. So tickets are available on our website right now. There is a limited amount. There are still some available. So guys, wisconsincaps.com if you're interested. If you're going to be in Marinette or Wisconsin or Upper Michigan, come on out and check it out. But that's an amazing encounter. I mean, just there's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's one of only 2 visual encounters on the property. And the second encounter that I know of was actually my mom's saw one on the property. So
Wow.
you and my mom are both going to be at the convention and on that hike. And it's not my story to tell. So if you guys want to hear more about Ma's encounter with the Sasquatch on the property, you'll have to come out to the convention, and she'll tell you as well. So
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time.
It is.
Yeah, there's all kinds of great sounds on that property at night. A lot of things that you're not expecting to hear, but they're there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, all night long. It's going to be great. So you had an amazing encounter, and thankfully you're in the safety of an RV that didn't get rocked or pushed over or rocks thrown at or anything like that. But a lot of these encounters that people have, maybe they're not so lucky. And being the fact that you're in the field of Bigfoot research and accustomed to all this and dealing with the psychological effects like this was an exciting event for you. This was something, that once in a lifetime kind of experience. But that's not the case for everyone. And you've spent a lot of time interviewing people and researching. And can you tell us a little bit about how that started, where it went, and the project itself?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I was working in the mental behavioral health field, as you said earlier. I was working with kids that had behavior issues, and a lot of those kids, their behavior issues were resulting from emotional disturbance and trauma that the situations they had been through before. And in the course of doing my everyday job working with these kids, I mean, some of these kids, I'd be around them 8 hours a day, and you get to know them, you get to understand how these things affect them, and you end up treating the side effects, you end up the after effects, just so they can get through their days and be able to make it through. I was working with them in a classroom situation, and we still had to take care of those issues. But then I started to make the connection in my mind, because at the same time I was doing my research, just like any other Bigfoot researcher, trying to find out more. I'd been out in the field, a good bit at that point, and I started to realize that some of the people that I talked to that were Bigfoot witnesses complained of some of the same things that the kids I was working with on a daily basis were doing. Mostly sleep disruption, sleep deprivation, those type of things, night terrors, nightmares. Anybody who's ever had a night terror can understand just exactly, to what it's like to wake up yelling and screaming at the top of your lungs in the middle of the night, and just to be shocked out of it from just a single image in your mind, just that single thought that gets you. And I started to find that connection. And Craig Salk was actually one of the first guys I talked to about it. And and I asked him, I said, "Do you think there's something to this?" And he says, "There's definitely something to this," because he had talked to a lot of witnesses that had been really shaken up as well. And we all have, as researchers, we all come across these folks, and we know how greatly affected they could be. And then I started to realize just how underserved that this was in our research community. And I talked to some people that I worked with on a daily basis. I mean, we're talking about, one of these individuals had a piece of paper from Harvard on the wall, and told me, he said, "Look, you're onto something. You might as well follow it through." And so that's when I decided to do the study. And the biggest result that came out of that study for me was that I wished I had asked better questions, because at the time I was just trying to pull everything together and do what I can and get going. And originally my goal was to have 500 cases to be able to put into this study. And then after 3 years and interviewing 408 witnesses, almost all of them twice at least, I got to a point where I said, this has been a lot of work. And that's when I started to say, okay, I'm just going to compile this and put this together and see what I've got. And that's when the standards for the study came about. And that's when I had to start vetting all the stories and everything that I had. And unfortunately, the first thing I had to do was eliminate anyone that had a personal or family history of mental behavioral health diagnosis. Not because I didn't believe them, not because they weren't believable, not because they were bad people or anything like that, just because for the sake of the study itself, for the data that you're putting out there, that's one thing that people can point to and say, you can't count that. You put these people, they may be seeing something or whatever. That's what the skeptics do. That's what the trolls do. And so for the sake of the data, the purity of the data, I had to eliminate them. And then there were certain people other people whose stories morphed and changed every time I talked to them. The details got bigger and better, and things became, more prolific with them. And then I said, well, that's not a good idea either. So going through a lot of these things, I had to get into interrogation techniques. I had to go into so many of these folks that, or these things that were done there. As part of my job, I took a course on micro expressions, how you can recognize micro expressions and how to interpret them. That played into it as well. So I kind of got kind of took a free ride on my job on that one. But other than that, I was able to vet everything down to 148 cases. And when I asked some people about that, I says 148 cases good enough for a case study. And we had one At that point, one person told me, one case is good enough for a case study. And I was just like,
Mhm.
why didn't you tell me that before? Gee, but that's when I started to go in and really get into the data. I mean, these were 148 people that had absolutely powerful stories, absolutely sure of what they were seeing. And there was no ambiguity. It could have been something, this could have been that. It was huge creature covered with hair, walking bipedally every time. And the breakdown was 122 men or 112 men, excuse me, and 36 women. That how it broke down to. And the results were, in some ways, they're what I expected them to be, and in other ways there were surprises about it. And uh, but the thing that I felt most when I was talking to these people, because a lot of these people I talked to for a third time just to confirm their stories and make sure that they were all doing okay, was that the pain that they were feeling, the discomfort that they were feeling. Some of these folks had been more than 20 years since their encounters, and they were still feeling effects from it. And that was profound to me. To be able to go there, that's one of the striking things about that study, was that the lasting nature of these effects and how pervasive it got into their lives. And one of the gentlemen that I spoke with, he had not ever spoken to anybody about his encounter. And he had it when he was 23. He talked to me when he was 58. And the only reason he responded to me at all was because I was on a Facebook group talking about this, and I was looking for witnesses. And I was somebody who he didn't know, a total stranger, but I was very interested in exactly what he was going through. So he took the leap of faith and contacted me, and told me his story after 36 years. And this gentleman, it's amazing. He's a great example of what people go through when they have these encounters. And everything in his life changed because of it. Everything. He had gone hunting on a friend's property and was sitting in a tree stand, heard a commotion behind him. A doe ran out in front of him, breathing very hard, and then he heard a noise behind him. And so he peered around the tree, kind of craned around and looked back, and about a 6-foot bush was there. And then from here up, he could see the chest of a Bigfoot, and it did not look happy. It looked angry that he was there. And this is a guy who had been at that point, he was 23, but he'd been in the woods since he was a little kid, and he'd been hunting all the time. And it terrified him. It absolutely terrified him. He sat in that tree stand with his rifle clutched to his chest and his eyes squeezed shut because he was terrified of what he had seen. Again, this is something nobody expects to see. You go out in the woods and there's all kinds of things that you expect to see, but like a lot of us, our first encounter is accidental. It's random, and you come across something that's not supposed to be there, and then it's so huge and it's terrifying. Mm-hmm. It absolutely terrifies you. In one of my experiences, I thought, wow, this thing could walk right over here and pull my arms out of my sockets, and there's nothing I could do about it. And those kind of thoughts hit your mind when you see these creatures, because you tell somebody, oh, it's 8 feet tall, maybe 9, shoulders 3 foot wide, it's maybe 700 pounds or 800 pounds, it's a huge thing. And they go, wow, that's really big. But then they don't understand the scale that you're talking about until you actually show them something that size. And that's when it starts to boggle the mind. And this particular fella, it changed everything in his life. He never went back to that property. That property was owned by a good friend of his. Never went back there. Whenever he and that friend got together, that friend had to come see him either at his house or at some neutral site. Never went back there. That particular property was on his route to work that he had. And he changed that route to add 20 minutes to his commute each way. And he did that for 20 years, working at the same place. And he would tell me every time that he would see something that would remind him of that experience. It could have been the same type of rifle. It could have been a hat that was like the one he was wearing or the jacket that he was wearing. Those little triggers sent him right back into his response. And that's called in mental behavioral health field, it's called stress response. I know a lot of people like to use the term PTSD for whatever stress they experience, and that's kind of dangerous when you start to talk about it, because there's a whole spectrum of stress responses. And so he would go into the stress response, and his pulse would quicken, his breathing would become shallow and rapid, and he would go in and just lose all concentration, not be able to think about things. He would pick up little details, like little details around the room that didn't mean anything, but he became hyper vigilant for anything like that. And what that is, that stress response that we go through, it's your body preparing itself for a confrontation, preparing to protect itself. And everybody knows about adrenaline in the body. Okay, the adrenaline fires your body up and gets you ready to go, and it does it in a hurry. Well, the brain has its own version. The brain has a chemical that's released called cortisol, and it fires your brain up and gets you going, ready for all kinds of any response you're going to have to a perceived threat. And that puts you in a state that's very close to ADHD. It's much akin to ADHD, and that usually lasts about 30 to 60 minutes, maybe 90 for some people. And then it dissipates and it's gone. But you think about these folks, every time they go into these stress responses, being terrified, boom, they keep doing it. And they keep going into this state again and again and again. And this particular gentleman did this for over 13,000 days. When you think about it, okay, he was 59 years old when he spoke to me about his experience, and had never told anybody. It had cost him his marriage, and it cost him some friends, and it cost him a lot in his life. But the only thing he was more afraid of than that creature was trying to tell somebody about it. The stigma was so strong in his mind. And that's one of the things that I talk about. That's where the specter of cryptid encounter syndrome came in there, because normal trauma victims don't want to talk about what they went through. A traumatic car accident or witness an act of violence or anything like that. They don't want to talk about those things because retelling is reliving, right? What I found with cryptid witnesses, particularly Bigfoot witnesses, is that they would love to talk to somebody. They would love to tell somebody about what they're doing, what they went through, but they're terrified of what the reaction is going to be, of ridicule, of harassment, even assault in some cases that I've been able to document. One fellow from the study that I did lost his job because he was talking to people about it in the lunchroom, and his boss didn't like it and let him go. And the stigma is real, and it's warranted in a lot of people. And you really have to be able to find somebody you can trust to be able to share this information with. On my first encounter, I was very lucky. I had my wife at the time. She knew something was wrong, and she interrupted me and said, "Hey, what's going on? This has been 3 days of this, stumbling around like I was." And she interrupted me, and she listened, and that was the great thing. Listen without judging. So these experiences are amazing when it comes down to it. They are much like what you see in trauma victims and in more, let us just say, more common sources of stress. And it's impactful. It's amazing to talk to these people, and you hear the stress and the pain in their voices, and to watch them relate their stories.
I can only imagine. I have so many questions and comments. I started taking notes.
Yeah, I'm a talker, so watch out.
No, you're good. You're good. But I have so much stuff that, like, this is really good. I'm super excited to get into this more and stuff, and I don't want to forget anything. Before we get to that, I want to tell you, at Hayden, I guess, like, I don't have the, I want to say that if I've been growled at on the property, I've been in the back part of the property and literally felt the ground shake as something walked by. Okay. I've dealt with all that on other properties. I've, had rocks thrown at me. I've been growled at as well. All these things. there's one thing that happened up at Hayden that stopped me from going back for several weeks. And so we sleep in our vehicles when we're up there, which is, better than tent camping on that property. But my mom sleeps in her vehicle and I slept in the van at the time. And we had been hearing my mom heard like talking outside the vehicle, or like an owl like screaming right outside of her car and stuff. So we started putting out audio recorders. And so that was the one time that we were up there. Well, then the next time we both woke up at night, and it was the exact same time, separate vehicles, unconnected. And we both got up the next morning and said, "Did you hear talking outside the vehicle?" And we both agreed like something was out there. And I listened back to the audio, and there's stuff on it. It's not super loud. It's not Sierra sounds or anything like that. But there was this vocals on there, and it disturbed me so much that I didn't tell anybody that I heard it. Now I've talked about it, since then, and told people that I have this. But when I first had it, I just said, I don't want to go to Hayden this weekend. No, let's do something else, And for a couple weeks until I finally processed that, and I kind of talked to Craig and stuff, and it got me to go back up there. But it was, I don't know why it affected me so much that, like, I felt it. I've experienced all kinds of stuff up there, but this one piece of evidence just shook me. So,
it's the unexpected that gets you.
Mm-hmm.
People don't expect to see these creatures. People don't expect to experience what they do. And it's incredible the impact that it can have. And, one of the things you and I both do, I think we both prowl, social media and the different groups that are out there looking for information and maybe, people to talk to and things like that. And inevitably the question comes up, what would you do if you saw Bigfoot? And then the answers start to go, to roll in there. Oh, I do this and I do that. And for my research, I can tell you, you have no idea what you'll do. None. There's no way to predict it. And the only thing that I've found that actually moves the needle a little bit towards predictability is training in confrontational situations. Police officers, first responders, that type of stuff. They handle those situations a little bit better, but not enough to really say that there's trending there. I've talked to combat veterans, guys, that were in the middle of some of the most horrific things you've ever seen. They saw what they saw, and they just squeezed their eyes closed and turned away because they didn't know what to do. They're trained for a lot, but they're not trained for that. And then I've talked to 80-year-old grandmothers who have had that experience, and they pick up a branch and they're ready to go to war. They're going to go down fighting is what they say. And so you have no idea how it's going to happen. You and I, we've had some encounters, some really weird experiences in our lives. And even then you found something that stopped you in your tracks. And I'm sure at some point, as I keep doing this, so there might be an experience out in front of me that I won't know what to do with. And you have no idea how your mind's going to react. You have no idea what the raw you is going to do when it comes down to this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we record everything, as every place that we go and stuff. And I'm watching the footage back. It was me and Craig standing in the back turnaround, right? The back behind the pond there. And so there's the big turnaround, and then there's like maybe 8 feet of woods and then a big open area. And me and Craig both hear and feel these footsteps going through. And I'm watching this footage back and I'm going, you idiot, why didn't you just go back there? You're 8 feet away from seeing this thing on thermal, because there's too much brush in between you, but there's a little path there. I could have just walked right back there, seen it on thermal and anything. And at the time, the thought never crossed my mind. I stood there, I waited, and I'm thinking, my life is over. If that thing comes this way, I'm done, whatever. And I just stood there and listened and waited, and then it stopped and we went on with our night and stuff. But looking back at it, I'm like, why didn't you go? Why didn't you go there? And, even questioning myself as to why I didn't do these things. So definitely interesting. We are going to take a really quick break here for station identification and super chats. And when we come back, guys, if you have questions or comments, put them in the questions section and we will get to them. I know there's already a bunch there.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
So I'm trying to catch up on comments here because all of a sudden there was like 12 of them. All right. If you have questions, please put them in all caps so I can see them quickly here. I'm going to address this one. Ma's story in the book is in the August of 2020 chapter. So, Lee, if you want to check that out, it's August of 2020.
Now, it's not in my book. That's in yours,
that's
right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's in the Bigfoot is hiding. Yeah, that's 10 years of research on the hiding adventure property. If you're interested in it, that's the property that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, and it's available on Amazon.com. There you go. So that's my plug for my own show. I never do that. But okay. So did any of these experiences people where people started having PTSD include aggressive or just surprise? So was anybody like attacked or were they violent encounters?
Well, first, let me again caution people about using PTSD as a blanket kind of term. Telling somebody that they have PTSD could cause some adverse reactions that, because PTSD is right at the top of the scale. That's where there's actual emotional damage done, psychological damage done. So you want to be careful with using that terminology, and because if you tell somebody that doesn't have PTSD that they do, they could overreact. They could have, bad, it could even worsen their situations that they have. So somebody who's feeling acute stress, it would be the best way to say it. And that way it's safer for that person that you're talking to. Now, some of these folks, some of them, we're talking about were bluff charged. There were a few of them. If I recall correctly, it's about 8, I believe, people experienced a bluff charge or some sort of aggressive behavior like that. So a few people had things thrown at them, pine cones and stones and twigs and things like that. But for the most part, people just saw them, just came across them. There were a bunch of road crossings. There were a bunch of people that were hiking, and boom, there it is, right on the trail in front of them, that type of thing. But you have to understand, when you have these experiences, these folks, they're not out there Bigfooting. They're not out there looking for these things. You're confronted with something that's not supposed to exist. Let's face it, Bigfoot's a punchline to a lot of people. And when it comes down to it, you see this, it is a reality jarring situation. You have to start to question what you believe and what's there. And it makes you go through that whole thing. So that hits you. And then the immense size of these things is just overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. I used to work in the radio business, and I did sports, and I got to interview basketball players from the NBA. And you think, wow, those guys are big. Well, somebody 7 feet tall is a pretty big person, but you add another foot, maybe 2, somewhere between, a foot or 2, and you basically double the weight of these guys. That's what you're experiencing. And these things it is such a shocking experience to your mind and to your psyche that, aggression is not even really necessary to jar somebody out into these acute stress situations. So there were a few, but not many.
Very good. Courtney would like to know, you had talked about earlier that you ruled out anyone with like mental illness and stuff. What about people that may have had undiagnosed mental illness?
Well, that is something that I avoided because for the last 8 years, I've had to be very careful about. I worked as a paraprofessional. That is somebody who walked in basically was hired with no experience and was trained to do certain things, trained to help execute treatment plans that have been formulated by professionals, doctors and therapists and the like. So I'm not qualified to diagnose anybody, and I never will try, because that is left to somebody who knows a lot more about that particular area than me. So I didn't really try to pry into what other people were going to, because I wasn't qualified to do so. But I can tell you that I could recognize acute stress pretty easily. And I could tell when somebody was going through it. The way they appeared, the way they moved, their posture, their body language, the tone of their voice, the tempo of their breathing. And when they went to go talk about their stories, and then all those physical cues changed, when that affect was different, then you knew. And I'd been around people enough, that had been through acute stress enough to be able to recognize that somebody was in a bad way. And by the way, when I told you about that condition that you go to, that's akin to ADHD, and when it comes to acute stress response, you can't fake that. People cannot fake that. I've watched people that have tried to put that out there, and they're maybe good for a few minutes, but it is so intense and it is so detailed a response that even they can't do it. People have been through it before, can't do it again. They can't do it just on their own. So when somebody hits that condition, it's pretty recognizable, and it's pretty genuine.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We have taken witnesses that have reported stuff back out into the field and say, hey, can you take us where it happened? Show us, so we can do research and study here. And watching them go back to that spot, you can see, like, there's no faking. There's no, yeah, I was over here or nothing. It's like, it was over there. You can go there if you want. I'll wait here, and it's definitely, like, you interview enough people, you can tell these things, and it bothers them. Like, even just chance encounters, the one in particular I'm thinking of right now, like, didn't even see one, had something following him out and, like, grunting and growling, kind of bluff charging through the woods. And he was with his son, and he was so terrified for that he will not go back into there. He hunted there all the time. Him and his son went in, like, squirrel hunting and stuff, and it bothered him. He would not go in there unless we were with him. And
yeah. And when you see seasoned woodsmen, seasoned hunters, seasoned outdoors people that won't return to an area, that should tell you something right away. And one thing I say to a lot of skeptics, that they there's no physical evidence that have been proven or anything like that, and I say, well, here's a group of people that are having very real documented reactions to your supposed make-believe creature. So it's worth looking into. It's worth studying, and that's the foot in the door in real science that we have, because this is all based on actual science that's done every day in the mental and behavioral health field.
Let's see. This is a comment on your study size. The larger number of studies, the more data points. So you can find correlations between these encounters. So let's talk a little bit about that. What correlations have you discovered about the behavior of these creatures, about the behavior of the witnesses? Besides, we've kind of talked a little bit about that, the traumatic instance of these encounters. What else do you see in behavioral patterns?
Well, when it comes down to it, there are 5 basic categories that people fall into when it comes to stress response and things like that. Everybody knows fight or flight. I mean, those are very common. But there are actually 3 more categories that are there. There's freeze, which a number of people know about. So you got fight, flight, or freeze. And then there's a 4th category called fawn or flop. Fawning is when you avert your eyes, or you close your eyes, or you turn away. Flopping is when you just fall straight down on the ground. And there's a 5th one that is very complex. It's called a friending response. And a friending response is where somebody believes that they had some intimate contact, some intimate sharing with the source of the stress that they're having. And in this case, it would be with the creature itself. There's a lot of people that feel they have a very close connection with these creatures after an encounter like that. And it was really, I wasn't surprised that the largest segment of those people, 72 of which, almost half, had some sort of flight response, some sort of fleeing, whether it had been immediately or within a few moments of the encounter, of somebody who just moved to get out of there. Okay, and it was that's pretty predictable. I think it's easy to see that coming. Okay, the next highest subgroup was people that froze, people that just froze in place. There were 31 of those. And as I stated, there were, a couple of these guys were combat veterans, and they just froze right where they were. And some of these folks stood right where they were for as much as an hour before they wanted to move. It was that powerful a thing. And then, I was expecting, the fight response to be the next highest one, but it was actually the fawn or flop group that became the next largest one. People that would turn away or close their eyes. Some of these people just dropped straight to the ground because their legs gave out from under them. There were actually 27 people that were in that group. So it was surprising there. That I was expecting maybe somewhere around 10. And but again, when you're documenting something new, these kind of things come up, and that's what you find. And then there were 7 people that that got into it, and they had the friending response. Just like this acute curiosity at that moment of what they were going through, and they felt that connection with the creature they were seeing. So the breakdown was somewhat, I guess, somewhat predictable, but there were a few surprises that were in there, and that was part of the fun going through the data that I had in that study. And all that whole study and everything, the analysis and everything, is included in the book that I'm about to release. It's called Footprints in the Mind. You can find that pretty soon. I'll get you the information on that when the publishing is complete, Barnaby. But in addition to that, the book has some stories from that study that people gave me permission to use for a book, as well as I use the stories to illuminate different factors of what it's like to go through this experience and and witnessing these creatures. So you can see all those details in the book.
Awesome. I can't wait, man. We are coming up on the end of the hour here. We have some more comments and questions to get to. I want to check with you if you need to get out of here at the top of the hour, or if we can kind of hang out a little bit yet.
I got as much time as you need, Barney. For you, my man, you just name it. You name it, I'll do it.
All right, then we're going to keep rolling here for a little bit yet, because we got a lot of stuff here yet to get through. If you guys have any questions or anything for Rich, I know there's a lot of comments, a lot of encounter stuff here. There's a lot to get through there, so we're kind of just going to stick to comments. But if you guys have any, we're going to stick to questions. If you have any questions for Rich with any of this stuff, any of the psychology stuff of it, please put them in there, and put them in all caps so that I can kind of zoom in on them. Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm going to put this one up first. So Oblivious here had a encounter. There's some stuff in the comments about that as well, but it says our own daughter said we were delusional, but she closes her drapes tight. And then that's why we don't talk about it. So people won't be, or that's why we need to talk about it, so people won't be surprised. Because, we were talking, this goes back to earlier talking about how, there's a lot of stigma about talking about this stuff, and people want to talk about it, but just don't come out because they're afraid of being ridiculed and stuff. Rich, do you, with as much shows and stuff that are on now, Expedition Bigfoot, Finding Bigfoot's been out forever. You have Expedition X. There's all these shows and all these podcasts and stuff that, I mean, you can't turn on your TV without seeing a commercial with Bigfoot in it now. There's that one traveling commercial where Bigfoot's there, and even right here in Wisconsin, we have billboards on the highway of Bigfoot for a casino in Upper Woods. And it's everywhere. Do you think now, I mean, because your study's been out for your study was out for quite a while now. So looking forward at this, some of the people that you interviewed, do you think that now with this being more of a mainstream topic and stuff and some of the ridicule going away, or do you think, I guess, that this is changing, that the stigma's kind of gone down? Are more people willing to talk about this, do you think? Or is it still just as bad as when you originally did your survey?
Well, the mainstreaming of this topic, I think we can we can thank the people from Finding Bigfoot for. That became sort of an entertainment phenomenon at some point with the way that show was. And I think a lot more people are aware of the subject. They weren't they weren't aware of how much scale there was to the Bigfoot world, and where how these things affected people and everything else. A lot of people, I still talk to a lot of people who find it hard to believe that every state and province in North America has had sightings, has had experiences. Everything except Hawaii, and they think, oh, well, I thought it was just in Washington or Oregon or whatever. And no, I've had experiences here in New Mexico where I live. There's a lot of people here that have had it, and most people just don't know about it. So the mainstreaming effect, I think the advertising and things like that, I think that's I think a normal effect that that's resultant from a show that became a phenomenon like Finding Bigfoot. Now, ask me if I'm a real fan of the show. Yeah, okay, yeah. There was something I loved the town halls on that one. I loved that. But apart from that, as a researcher myself, having been out there, in the woods, having the dirt under my feet, I wouldn't do a lot of things that they did and things like that. But that's what they did for the show. That was the fun of the show. And for whatever you think of the show did a lot of good for our community. And I think there's more people willing to come forward. I think because of it. I've found a lot more people openly speaking about it than I did back in the day when I really had to hustle to find people that wanted to talk to me about the study or anything like that. I had to guarantee everybody in that study anonymity in order for them to be able to talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk to me and use their real name as far as what I would report or anything like that. And I had to go by that because that's something that I understood was a really strong part of this. I don't know that the reaction people get is any more timid from skeptical people or everything like that. I mean, they still the stigma is still very strong from what I've been able to handle. And you and I are of the same ilk. We stopped caring what people thought about us a long time ago. It just doesn't matter to us because I tell people all the time. I say, okay, if they don't exist, tell me what I experienced, tell me what I saw, and I'll explain to them. I'll tell them every detail that I have about my encounters, and they can't explain it. So I know what a bear looks like. That wasn't a bear. I know with this whole thing with the study out there that all the misidentification, it's all misidentification, and they tried to say it was all black bears, and it's not, because when somebody says, yeah, bipedal creature, up on 2 feet walking, and it's massive, that's way bigger than any 300-pound black bear that you see. And so the reactions are still very bad. They're still very difficult. I think at some point I'll probably end up doing like a 10-year anniversary of this thing and seeing how it's changed over time. I think that's the next logical step when it comes to doing this. But right now it's about getting the information out and making people aware that it's okay that they had this experience. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not crazy. They didn't do anything wrong to be able to get it, and it's it's a good thing for them to be able to talk about it. And I think hopefully this knowledge will make us all a little better witnesses for them to be able to receive what they've gone through and be able to listen to their stories and talk with them about it without judgment.
Yeah, you talk about misidentification of bears and stuff. There are Bigfoot reports where in countries around the world where there are no bears. So what are they seeing? And then, even here in the US, there's areas where, there are no bears, there's no population of bears at all. And we're still getting, the Bigfoot sightings as well. So, okay, if there is a bear sighting, that bear is extremely out of place as well. Like, it doesn't belong there either. So, what are we seeing to begin with? But
yeah, one of the things I tell people is, I will grant you misidentification and all this other stuff, all these other things, to throw these things out, and I'll grant you 98% of the reports, that there's something fallible about them. But it's that other 2%. It's that 2 times out of 100 you have to say, okay, let's take a look at this, and let's be very serious about this. And that's when the real questions come up. And personally, I enjoy talking to skeptics because they ask some of the best questions. They push us harder than anyone else will. And I've had a few of them. I say, well, let me take your information. I'll get back to you on that. Let me do some research on this. And I try not to be that person that says, oh, I'm an expert, I know everything. I don't know everything. The best of us, when it comes down to it, if the Bigfoot phenomenon is a 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, I think the best of us have about 150 pieces put together. We're just not that sure yet, And so to be able to sit there and say, I don't know. I don't know is a perfectly good answer to some of these questions. Say, I don't know, but I'll go to work on that. I'll let you know and see where it is. We just don't have enough data. And I think that's a resultant of some dysfunction we have in the research communities where people don't share information. There's a lot of people that stay very close to the vest on what they know and what they discovered. And if we really want to solve this thing, we have to be able to share information the way real science does. We have to be able to publish this information and put it out there and say, okay, anything that I do or say or I put out there, I really, really don't care if somebody proves me wrong. But I'm saying, this is what I've found. Tell me I'm right or wrong. And, that's what the thing with this study. I haven't had anybody tell me that this study was fallible in any way or they didn't believe in the study in any way, because it's real data. I did the best science I could at the time. And now I know I could do better science with it. I know I could do a better job with it. And that's going to be reflective, I think, in the next time I do it. But we as citizen scientists, as people that are going out there and doing this work in lieu of mainstream science that won't touch this subject, we have to go out and do the best we can. And we also have to walk into it with enough humility to say, I may be dead wrong, but somebody's got to prove it to me. Somebody's got to provide data, not just, well, I believe different than you, because there's way too much of that in the Bigfoot world. We got to go out there and find real data, generate new data, and innovate the ways that we research this subject. And I think that's the next thing that we have to be able to do. We've got to turn the corner on the 50-year cycle that we've had of just walking out in the woods and looking around. We've got to be able to there's so much data out there. We can data mine, we can analyze everything statistically, and then find better ways, use that data to find better ways to go out and do our research.
Absolutely. I'm curious as to, you talk about like your people who are standing there, like that had an encounter and are just standing there for an hour at a time. What percentage of these people were out there in the wilderness, with just a gun at their side or just walking or whatever? And how many people did you have that were like, say, on the back porch of their house or driving and saw a roadside crossing? Or where were these people when they had their encounters? And did you see any kind of trend in the psychological effects? Like if somebody's driving down the road and sees one cross the road, does that have a strong of effect on someone as it would if this guy's out in the woods without a gun on his own and this thing comes up and screams in his face?
Well, I know the roadside crossings, I believe there were 24 of them out of the group. And most of the people were outdoors people. They were out there hiking. They were out there hunting. And, as far as around their homes and things like that, I believe it was, boy, you're pushing me because I didn't really use this as a data point, and I really wish I had. If I'm not mistaken, I think somewhere in the area of about 30. had things around their home and around the property that they had. I'd have to double check on that, and that would, the way I had everything compiled, I would have to go through them one by one. But yeah, I mean, and as far as the effects that they had, the effects, there's no real correlation to the activity that the person was going through or was engaging in, and the kind of effects that they had. I mean, there's just no way to predict how these things hit. I remember one lady in particular. She had a roadside crossing. This thing was in front of her for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, and it shook her right down to the core, just to the point where she couldn't operate, and she didn't even want to drive anymore for a while. And it took a long time for her to be able to get back to work and everything else because she'd had this traumatic experience. Another one was a gentleman who was on his farm, and he had an animal stolen. He had just slaughtered a steer, and the carcass was hanging in a barn. Maybe for the barn was maybe 15 feet high, and it was hanging from a rope. And the carcass itself was about 7 feet off the ground. And this thing was taken. He left the barn to go do something, came back, and it was gone. And he found some partial footprints because the dirt in there had been packed down very well, but he could find some partial footprints that were in it. And he just said, "Okay, well, I gotta shut the door." So, and that was his reaction to it. He didn't change anything else that he did except to have the door shut, and make sure that it was more secure. Because I mean, you really don't know how it's going to hit you. This thing was probably within a few feet of him, and picked its spot to go in there and get and grab it and get out without him knowing about it. And then you think about something big enough to take a steer carcass and pull it down and run with it and get out of the way. And he said he was gone for maybe a minute or so, and he just came back and, wow, okay, it's gone. I mean, no bear can do that. Obviously, no bear can do that. So his reaction was, wow, okay, I just got to shut my door and everything will be fine, and stayed with what he was going to do. So, I mean, it's really tough to tell what somebody's reaction to all this is going to be.
Again, the rest of the witness or whatever, the stories in the comments. But he says, we were in our backyard, back porch, or in our bedroom. And I think being able to easily retreat keeps us from getting scared.
Could be. I don't think a lot of people think about a point of egress when they're out there until they need one. And that's part of being prepared when you're out in the woods. It's part of understanding what's going on. You'll be able to go out there and see what's going on and understand where you've been. And people try to backtrack and they go the same way. Well, that's one point of egress. But have you really studied where you're going to be? Do you really know the land that's out there? I mean, a lot of people are out there in national forests and national parks, and they stick to the trails that they have. And that's where a good number of sightings can come from. But if something happens in front of you and you've got a 5-mile trail behind you that just winds everywhere, do you know a different point of egress than that 5-mile trail to get back? And I think having that in mind is a great idea, no matter what you're doing out in the woods, whether you're hunting or hiking or camping or whatever, is to know that area and know where you can get away or get out in some ways. It's pretty smart. It's the same principle as when people ask you, should I take firearms out there? Well, yeah, take firearms for what you know is there. Take firearms for a mountain lion, take firearms for a bear, coyotes, whatever you're going to encounter. That they, what's out there, and that you're prepared for that. Because trust me, if a Bigfoot wants you, I don't think there's much you're going to be able to do. And you got to have some serious firepower to be able to deal with that. And I mean, we're talking about creatures that have been reported to take a .308 round to the chest, and then get up and walk away. I mean, that's not supposed to happen for anything. And so, basically, you just got to be prepared for what's there and be smart about being out in the outdoors. Understand the land and understand what's there, and how have 2 or 3 different ways to get out of there, not just the way you came.
Definitely good advice. Definitely. And that goes for anywhere you are. I mean, when you go into any kind of building or event, whenever you go to the theater, they tell you to make sure you know where the fire escapes are. That's just common sense that, you should be looking at these things, because look at how many, I don't want to get into all that stuff, but look at all the tragedies and stuff that happen around the world at malls and festivals and stuff nowadays. I mean, it's something that unfortunately we need to think about on a daily basis of know your ways out, know your escapes, and know your surroundings. But
Yeah, I mean, it's just common sense, but a lot of us don't do that because we're comfortable and familiar with, are familiar enough with where we are that we don't think about those kind of things. And that's, on an everyday basis in this day and age, it's a smart thing to do.
yep. Unfortunately, that's the way things are. But on a lighter, happier note, guys, again, we are going to both be speaking and presenting and doing a Bigfoot hike. If you want to come out with myself and Rich Daniels, if you're anywhere in the Wisconsin, Upper Michigan, Minnesota area, come on out. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be May 31st. Tickets are available at wisconsincaps.com. And then June 1st, we are going to be both speaking at the convention. And if you can't make it out to Wisconsin, but you still want to hear Rich's presentation, because we'll get to this really quick here, you have a new theory or stuff that you wanted to be presenting at the convention as well. And if you want to hear about that and more details, we will be live streaming this event for people for just $5. You can get a virtual ticket, and you will hear Chad Lewis's presentation. You will hear Doug Hychek's presentation, Rich's, and myself all that day for just $5. You can watch it live wherever you are, or if you can't watch it live, you can watch it on repeat anytime after the fact. You just get a link. So if you're interested, go check that out. WisconsinCaps.com. Click on the banner that you see on the screen, and you can get tickets. But
part of my presentation, I'm going to forward an origin hypothesis for these creatures, and it's something that Craig Salk and I talked about a lot back then, when we were, those endless conversations that we had. And something that he started with me, and my work with the emotional and psychological effects of encounters took precedence. But now that the work on that particular area is done, I'm shifting more towards this one, and that's going to probably be the focus of my work for the next few years, to be able to go in there. So I'm going to be revealing that at the convention too. So I would hope a lot of people will come and check it out.
Absolutely. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. And Doug will be presenting all of his new research on the Sasquatch Legend Meets Science 2 and all the science behind that. I think Chad is doing mysterious creatures and folklore and stuff of Wisconsin and Minnesota, or I'm sorry, Wisconsin and Michigan. And then my presentation is all on the Haydn adventure and all the evidence and stuff from 10 years of things that we've got there, and all the book here. And I keep forgetting, the Haydn Adventure exhibit will be on display for the very first time. It's the tour and displays and stuff that Craig did at the Haydn Adventure is going to be on tour. So it's interactive. You can QR code scan things and hear Craig talk about it. Craig, for anybody that I don't think we've explained who Craig is. Craig and Barb Salk are the property owners of the Haydn Adventure. They're the ones that started the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. And the Craig Salk was featured on Finding Bigfoot, the Super Youper episode. So that's who Craig is that we keep mentioning.
Yeah, it was season 2, yes.
No, it's like season 6 or 7, I think.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty late in it, but yeah. But awesome. So it's been a great show. Before we leave, you've kind of alluded to this a little bit, and I wanted to get it in. Can you tell us about your first experience, the one that got you into this? Because we haven't talked about that.
Man, yeah, it was, I mean, even for the Bigfoot world, it was kind of a weird one. I was living and working in Western Maryland at the time. It was January of 2000. The young lady that I was dating had 2 small children, and we found ourselves on a particularly warm day for that time of year. It was getting up to about 60 degrees. You don't waste a day like that, because they don't come along too often in the foothills of the Appalachians like that. So we took them out for a picnic that day. That became visiting friends. That became going out to dinner, and we ended up getting in kind of late, 9:30 or 10, somewhere in that area. She lived out in the sticks. I mean, literally there was an area on the side of a hill that was carved out of a wooded area for her house and a couple other homes that were there. We had to drive up and then drive around, and her driveway actually encircled her house. So we would park on the part of the driveway that was between her house and the woods, and the driveway was about 40 feet from the tree line. Upon getting out of the house, or out of the car, we realized there was something big moving in the woods. And out there, in that area, when you hear something big in the woods, you immediately think black bear. And that was what clicked in my mind. And I said, oh, there's a bear out there. We better get going. She hustled her kids in real quick, to get them up to bed. My job was to get all the dishes and leftover food from the picnic and everything together. And I ended up filling my arms like this, and the only thing I had left to get the hatchback of her car down was my right elbow. So I did one of these and shoved the thing down and got inside. After a few minutes, she came back downstairs, went to the door, and looked out to see if she could see the bear. And the only thing she could really see was that my right elbow is terribly inefficient, and the dome light of her car was still on. And she had to go to work the next day, couldn't let the battery run down. So somebody had to go out there and shut that hatch. And any of you ladies watching, chivalry's not dead. I took the job and I was going to go out there. But I knew I'd been in the woods enough to know that you want to be able to see what's out there. So I turned off the porch light and I turned off the light to the mudroom that I was standing in. And I just stared out the window, trying to get my eyes to readjust to the dark. I wanted to be able to see if there's a black bear coming towards me. I mean, it just needs to have that little bit of vision. And after a couple of minutes, I realized there was more light than I had given credit for. I can't tell you if it was a full moon or if it was a near full moon, but there was a lot of moonlight coming down. There was about 200 feet away or so, there was a lamppost that sat at where the driveway forked. You go to the right and it goes around her house. You go to the left and it goes farther up the hill to where her uncle's house was. So they had the lamppost there to illuminate the fork. So there was some ambient light that was out there. So I stepped outside and my eyes went immediately to a point in the tree line that made sense to me, because there was an area there where there were no bushes and briars, because the whole tree line was bushes and briars, except for this spot where they had all been removed or beaten down. It was about 15 feet wide. And that's where we would go back into the woods, take our kids on a hike or to play back there or wherever. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that was where she would take food that was about to go bad and she would dump it out there so animals could eat it. So I knew enough to know that bears aren't going to come try through briars and bushes trying to get at you. They're going to come the path of least resistance. So that was the most likely place where I was going to see something if it was coming out. Walked to the back of the car with my eyes on this space. And as I got to the back of the car, I put my hand on the hatchback. And staring at this space the whole time, I pushed the hatch down. Out of the corner of my eye, see the light go off. But I also see movement in that space at that time. And this is where it started to get a little weird, because the movement wasn't coming out of that space. The movement wasn't going across that space. The movement that I saw was straight downward. And that's why it caught my eye, and I stared, and I could make out a shape in that space. And you're looking at a space, again, about 15 feet wide, and that the bushes and briars all went up to where the canopy of the trees were, about 5 feet up. So it was about a 5 by 15 hole in the tree line. And the first thing I noticed about this shape that I saw is that it was huge. The head of it was right where the canopy of the trees were. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a big bear. Because the thing obviously just sat down, right? And its head was up 5 feet in the air. That's a huge animal when you think about it. And big black bears in that area get up to about 350 pounds or so, but they're not anywhere close to that, as big as this thing was. And I'm staring at it, and I'm looking at basically a brown silhouette against a black background, is what I'm seeing. And as I stare at it, I see shoulders sticking straight out. And I mean, that struck me as like another weird thing. Is like, wait a minute, bears don't have shoulders like that. Bears are slope shouldered, especially when they sit down like that. It gets even more prominent. And I'm looking at it, and these shoulders are just, I mean, these shoulders had to be about 3 feet wide. It was just, stunning to me. I was dumbfounded. What I didn't understand at that time, and I do now, was that I was going through a phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. That's where your brain's getting input and you're just not wrapping around it. It's just not processing it. You're not understanding anything that you're experiencing. And I'm looking at this thing and looking at this thing. That's a weird bear. That's crazy. And as I kept staring at it, I saw knees sticking up at angles going away from each other like that, kind of like a baseball catcher. And I'm saying, bears don't sit like that. Is that bear crouching? Because in my mind, I'm going, well, bears, they sit down on their haunches the way a dog does, or they'll sit right down on their behind and their feet will stick out. But the bears can't crouch. What is this? I mean, and I couldn't get off the thought that I was looking at a bear. But none of what I was seeing said bear at all. And I was just so puzzled. And it's 40 feet away from me. And I'm staring at it, and it must have been a minute, maybe a little bit more. And finally, I hear from the house, my then girlfriend had come to the door and said, "What are you trying to do? Get killed?" And yeah, snapped right back to reality, going like, "Oh, here's this massive bear sitting there. It's 40 feet away, and I got about 25 feet to go to get to the door." And everybody knows the first rule when you're around a bear: don't run. Because if you run, they will chase you. It's a prey response. Their food runs from them, so they just naturally go, and they'll catch you and they'll hurt you. So I just stood there and I said, okay, I'm just going to back up. And I just backed up, my eyes on this thing the whole time. When about 10 feet backing up, it hadn't moved. So I went, okay, turned around and just walked right back into the house. No problem. And, of course, my girlfriend's there. She says, "Did you see it?" And I went, yeah, I saw it. I had one of those things like, yeah, I saw something. I saw a bear, I guess. I don't know. And it just, I was still very confused about what I was going through. Well, we stayed up for a little while to make sure there were no problems, that bear wouldn't get anything or anything. And it was fine. Everything was good. Now you got to fast forward 5 years. Okay. I'm no longer dating that young lady. I met the lady who became my wife. We had moved to Orlando, Florida. One of the things that I deal with on an all too regular basis is insomnia. And I had a rough night one night. I couldn't get to sleep, couldn't operate. So I'm just sitting there 3 o'clock in the morning, flipping the channels, trying to find something to watch. And I came across this show on Bigfoot. And I absolutely remember saying the words, "This will put me to sleep." And so I started watching it, because up until this point, I had been what I would say is a Bigfoot agnostic. I had heard about Bigfoot, the supermarket tabloids and all this other stuff. And my dad had taken me to see the movie Mysterious Monsters when I was a kid. It was in the theaters. Bigfoot was a big part of that. But, I didn't really think too much about it at all. And I'm watching this show, and then there's a gentleman that comes on there from the state of Washington. And he describes what he saw. His situation was, he had heard a commotion out on his deck. And he went out to see what it was, and he walked out and looked around, and then he turned to his right, and right where the deck had joined to the house was something in the corner, and it was crouched down. And what he described was about a 95% match to what I had seen in that tree line 5 years ago. And it was just amazing. And I realized what it was that was sitting there 40 feet from me. And immediately, I broke out into a cold sweat. A chill went down my spine, as they say. My hands began to shake. And I got up and went to the bathroom to splash some water on my face, and all the color had drained from my face. And that realization of what it likely was just hit me like a jackhammer. And that was the first time I experienced that stress response that we're talking about earlier. And it was rough. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next night. I stumbled around for 3 days in that kind of state, just, totally distracted and everything. And that's when my wife, bless her heart, she's since passed, but she knew something was wrong. And she interrupted me and stopped and said, "Hey, there's something wrong with you. What's going on?" And that is that moment that every Bigfoot witness that I've talked to arrives at. Somebody wants to know what's happening with you. And that's when I came up with what I call the words. The words are what you say to somebody who's about to hear your story. And they pretty much amount to, "I just don't think you're going to believe me." And that's the hurdle that, Bigfoot witnesses have to get over to start talking about their experience. And the person on the other end of that is so important, absolutely positively important, that there's no judgment, that they're going to listen to you, and that they really do care about you, because this is a time when you find out who really are your friends, who really cares about you in your life. My wife, bless her heart, she went on to work for the U.S. Forest Service. She worked at the executive levels of the U.S. Forest Service, and never once ever in our time together told me that she believed in Bigfoot or not. She would never let me know. And she saw how much of an impact it had on me, how hard it was for me to be able to go through what I was going through. And then she saw the impact, and she cared about me enough to be able to listen without judgment and start talking about, "Okay, well, we got to get you through this, and we got to get you better, because you're useless right now." She used those words. She said, "You're useless right now. You can't do anything. We've got to get you through this." And that's how the journey all started for me. Went from there to just, searching the internet for everything I could find, the armchair researcher. After a few years, I got out in the woods and had a few encounters, mostly because of the people that I met along the way and were good researchers. I've had 4 encounters in 4 different states, and it's been a journey. But that experience, what it's like. It gets in your blood, and it never goes away. It's an intoxication of curiosity, of frustration, of everything that's involved, that you get involved in this, and it becomes what you do. It changed my life. And because if you'd ever told me I would have wrote a book about anything, I would have laughed at you. But now I've got, hopefully, within a week or two, I'll have this book out, and people will understand what it's like to go through those experiences. And I think that book is for the validation of those people that have those encounters, those experiences. Anybody who's ever been told they're crazy, anybody's ever been told how stupid they are because they believe in Bigfoot. These are real experiences that people had, and it's all for them. And I hope people really get a good insight into what it's like.
And I do not mean to diminish your encounter at all, but look at the impact of just seeing the outline of this had. And it didn't affect you at all when you first saw it. Oh, it's just a bear. And then years later, you have this revelation, and it comes down to that. And that's pretty powerful to think about, like that, just seeing that shape of it is so paradigm shifting that, oh my gosh, that's what it was. And I think that's important for people to realize, that these don't have to be, big screaming in your face encounters, being chased, or rocks, or any of that stuff. That just the realization of this is enough. So,
well, and there's nothing that it could have been that was that big. There's nothing in that area that is that. There's no elk out there. The deer don't get anywhere close to that big. Bears don't get that big at all. The research that I did on that area, the last time something that big lived out that way was, 10,000 years ago with the short-faced bear. And, unless there was a polar bear that made its way down to Western Maryland and somehow turned brown, I don't know.
wearing
There's not
shoulder
much else.
pads.
Yeah, there's not much else it could have been, and that, but people all over the country, and all over North America at least, are having those experiences, and it's and a lot of them are having that kind of impact on their lives. And I think it's time that we in the research community um, recognize that, and it changes the way that we operate. And to be able to go in there, because too many witnesses talk to a researcher or something like that, and the researcher does what I call rushing the creature. They'll sit down and say, okay, how big was it? What color was it? What was it doing? Did it stink? All this other stuff. And they'll just go and they'll talk about the creature and the creature and the creature. And here's this witness sitting there dumping all this information out there about this creature. And yet they've had this experience that's absolutely crushed them in some ways. And they, when the interview's over, the researchers, they said, oh, thanks for your time. I appreciate you talking to me. Bye. And they're gone. And the witness feels like a wrung out dish rag. And it's a hard experience to go through. I've been there myself. So what I do is I sit down with the witness and I'll say, how are you feeling? How are you dealing with this? Are you okay? And that usually lets them know, look, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to a person. I'm not talking to, some computer that's going to give me a bunch of information. I'm talking to you. And I want to know how you are and how you're getting through this, and it matters to me. And you would not believe the difference in information that you get. I had a lady who had an encounter that lasted possibly 40 seconds or so. And I told her to write down all the details about it and everything like that. And it can take some time, because these experiences crystallize in people's minds. They are very vivid, they are very detailed, and they don't go away. That's because your brain, the amygdala in your brain, marries trauma with memory. And that's why people are able to tell such stark details over and over and over again when it comes down to it. And this lady, off of 40-second encounter, a couple weeks later, sent me an account that was 11,000 words long, simply because we had that discussion about how she was feeling and where she was and how to cope with it a lot better and things like that. And then the information really poured out. And it's incredible, because it not only reveals not only what the creature, what they saw, but how the creature behaved, what the interaction that she felt there was, why she felt the way she did, and everything like that. It's an incredible amount of information that researchers can get, so much more information than they would if they just go in there and they rush the creature and talk about the beast all the time.
So really quick, you said that this thing was about like 5 foot when it was crouched, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So do you think that this would have had as much of an effect on you if it wasn't that big, standing? Or do you think that didn't have any effect on the size, as more of just the paradigm shift of realizing what you had seen?
Well, I mean, it stood out in my mind because of its size.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just that. I mean, because I didn't expect something 5 feet tall at number one, where it was. And then you combine that with the confusion of the downward motion that I had seen. So what this thing was doing was crouching down so it could see. It couldn't see through the trees, so it crouched down to see me. And so I knew it had come downward, but yet it was still huge. And the shoulders were so broad. They're just massive shoulders. So the confusion of it all, I really can't tell you. I mean, I don't know. I can only tell you what the experience was to me. What I saw, and the information that I was getting that wasn't clicking in my head, and it all came together years later. And I mean, the hypothetical, I really haven't gotten into that with this situation, because it's all so very real and so very stark in my mind at this point. I mean, for a while there, it was just stashed in my brain as kind of like this odd, really crazy memory. And then when it all came together, it was just like it all happened again. I went into that response 5 years later. So, the size of it, I think, was the first thing for me, because just the mass that was there, and the fact that I had seen it move, and just not knowing, just being so puzzled with it. And I think that's what made it stick in my head, and I think that's what it'll always be, because it's really hard for me to go outside of that experience because it's so vivid.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you have been super generous with your time. I mean, we have gone well into overtime here because this has just been an absolutely fascinating discussion. And I know there's so much more that you have to talk about because, like I said, you haven't even touched on the stuff that you're going to be talking about at the convention. So definitely, guys, if you're interested, if this has been a good interview for you, go check out that and get the virtual ticket because you can hear the whole presentation along with myself and, the other presenters. But thank you so much, man. I look forward to hanging out with you in a couple weeks here, and it's going to be a great time, and we're going to go Bigfooting together, and it's going to be a great weekend. So thank you so much for coming on today, man.
No, Barnaby, again, the opportunity to be here with you is such a great one, and I appreciate you inviting me on. It's less than a month now that, we got the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot Convention. It'll be my third time there. I love that area. I love the people up in that area. I can't wait to get back up there. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be an absolute blast. And, the opportunity to be here as well. It's just amazing. So, congratulations to you on your success and your research and your findings. I think you're one of the most forthright people I've seen when it comes to sharing information and showing what you have. And man, we can't get enough people like you in this field to be able to bring this the truth forward. And it's going to be a lot of fun in a month.
Thank you so much for all your kind words. I like to think that one of the things that I did learn from Craig, as we talked about earlier, is that Craig was a big advocate that he never said anything was a Sasquatch. He presented you with the evidence, the pictures, the audio, the stories, and it is up to you to decide. And I like to believe that that's how I carry everything we do with CAPS and how we present stuff. I mean, whether it be paranormal, UFO, Bigfoot, whatever we put out, it is what it is. Here's the evidence, and you can decide. So,
yep. And by the way, remind me to tell you the story about Craig sent me a photograph one time.
Okay.
And the reaction I had to the photograph, I cannot say here because
is that the trail camera back by the marsh?
No, it wasn't. I don't think it was a trail camera. But it was quite the reaction, quite animated, shall we say? So that's the kind of stuff that Craig brought out there. That's the reactions it got.
Absolutely, amazing man.
Yeah.
But all right, that is it, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will chat after the show, me and you. And until next time, guy. Well, thanks for being on.
My pleasure. Always my pleasure.
All right, take care, man. All right, guys, that is our show for this week. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you're interested in more from Rich Daniels, would love to have him back on the show here as well. But you can hear his whole presentation from this coming convention for just $5. All the virtual tickets, myself, Doug Hychek, and Rich and Chad Lewis will be presenting, and you can hear all that live or whenever you get a chance to watch it. But guys, coming up, if you want even more, this Thursday on the Paranormal Spectrum right here on the Untold Radio Network, 10 a.m., another past guest from the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot Convention will be Christopher Noel. I totally blanked there for a second. Christopher Noel will be joining me this Thursday, 10 a.m. on the Untold Radio Network. He has a brand new book out about UFOs, aliens, and consciousness, and he's going to be here to share all that with you. It is an amazing story. I've read his book. It's going to be a great show. And then, guys, coming up here, same time, same place, on Monday, on Monsters on the Edge, my guest will be joining me, Eli Watson from Small Town Monsters. I think it was Monster Fest. Monster Fest as well, coming up in Ohio, Canton, Ohio. And that is the Small Town Monsters Monster Festival. So, guys, Eli Watson will be joining us here next Monday to tell you all about that and all about all the stuff he's got going on at Small Town Monsters. So until next time, guys, I'm your host, Barnaby Jones, and you are listening to the Untold Radio Network. So until next week, guys, I'll see you on the edge.